This podcast is part of the C-Suite Radio Network, turning the volume up on business.
Welcome to the Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer. Join us as Deb talks with her guests, experts in their fields, as they share real-life stories and techniques to power up your business.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we're going to have so much fun because we're going to be talking about leadership. And I love this topic because it is something that gets bandied about a lot. Ooh, he's a good leader. She's a bad leader. All of these various things. But in many cases, we don't actually think about what a leader is, what makes someone a good leader, and more importantly, the tools that somebody needs. I don't care, people say, oh, he's a born leader. No, there are still skills and things that people have to learn in order to truly become good leaders. Lee Iacocca didn't just pop out of nowhere and knew how to be a good leader. All these various things. It really is something that we have to learn. So please join me in welcoming Mark Hinderliter to our program today. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Deb. I am excited to have this conversation. I'm just as passionate as you are about leadership. It's just so important.
Right.
And like you said, it's bantered around a lot. There's a bazillion books on it. And yet we find ourselves with not enough really good leadership.
Right.
So It's an important topic.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you before we jump in.
Yes, ma'am.
So Mark Hinderliter is a 35-year veteran of business working in multiple industries, including retail, service, manufacturing, construction, and oil and gas. He is an executive coach and business owner. Mark is a franchisee of Leadership Management International, a 50-year-old global company specializing in leadership and personal development. Mark holds a PhD in organization and management. I should have called you doctor. And is a graduate of the School of Hard Knocks, an ideal fusion of academic and industry experience. Prior to starting his own leadership development business, Mark was Senior Vice President of Human Resources for a billion-dollar global industrial service company. So again, Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Deb. I'm glad to be here.
Well, and it's funny. I joke about, I should have called you doctor, but that is something that is a very hard-earned education experience, and and it really is something that is not to be laughed at. So again, welcome, Dr. Hinderliter.
Thank you, Deb. Yeah. So here's a little thing about the PhD. It takes a little intelligence and a lot of staying power.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
A lot of grit, a lot of endurance to kind of do it over a several-year period. So,
right.
Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, and whether someone's working on any type of advanced degree, it's difficult, especially in this day and age, because we have so many other commitments. And most of the time, especially if you're working on a master's or a PhD, you may have a family, you probably have a job, and all of those things, and so that's it is very difficult. But what I love is as you said, you've got that book learning. As well as the practical experience. So that's what makes your expertise so valuable.
Thank you.
Well, let's take a little bit of a step back because, just as, it's people don't just become leaders. It's something that we just don't decide, hey, we're good at. So how did you decide this was your passion in life?
I think a lot of us discover our passion. I think there's a misnomer about passion that we just know at 12 years old that we want to be an astronaut or something like that. And that may be true for a few people. I think most of us, certainly for me, is your life experience and your work experience. You realize that you've got a knack for something, you've got a little bit of a gift for something, and that you feel like you're giving value when you're doing that. So, that's really where I learned develop the passion for leadership. I became a manager without really knowing how to be one. And so I realized how much I didn't know, And so I kind of went to work at really kind of studying leadership and really trying to understand it and get better at it. And the more that I studied it, the more I understood it, the more I put it into my real world practice, the better I got at it. And so I just really kind of developed the passion from learning and doing and realizing how much it mattered.
Great. You mentioned something that I want to use as kind of our springboard, and that's that you became a manager without knowing how to be a manager. And that is something that happens all the time. Probably,
absolutely.
Virtually every time. And, whether it's personal decision and choice, you put your name in for that promotion, you found a business, whatever it is, or someone else thought that you'd make a good leader.
Yep.
You've gone usually from being the worker bee to being the queen bee. And with really no training. And so let's talk about that, because, it's, as I said at the start, we don't just there are people who are better at being a leader, but, I really don't think it is something that we're just born with. We have to be taught these skills.
Yeah. Warren Bennis is somebody I've followed for a long time. When somebody asked him, are leaders born or made? His answer was, leaders are born and made.
Right.
And born is, I think maybe there may be a little bit of hard wiring that we have, kind of giddy up and go. And
they're more aggressive. They're more, all of those. They're definitely personality traits.
I think so. But if you made me give it a percentage, I'd say it's 10% born and 90% made. Leadership is really a set of skills and habits and practices that we forge over time. I think it's maybe like any other profession, like a musician or an athlete. Some of it, there's a little bit of gene pool involved, but the best athletes, the best musicians work hard at it.
Right.
They work hard at their craft, even though they may have some natural gifts. And I think that's true for leaders too, Deb.
Right. And I think one of the things it is a continual learning process. Just as, say the professional basketball player goes and shoots and shoots and shoots and shoots and shoots. A good leader is always attending seminars, is always reading books, all of these things, because things change, whether it's that technology changes, now everybody's having to deal with, oh my gosh, our job's going away because of AI, it's just a variety of things. And so you really do have to be on this continuing learning cycle in order to really be a good leader.
That's absolutely true. The best leaders are absolutely engaged in continuous learning. And I think for two reasons. One is just leadership's hard and complicated because people are complicated, but the second thing is exactly what you said. A whole lot of what you and I knew 10 years ago, it's either not true anymore or it's obsolete.
Right.
It's true in technology. It's true in the nature of the workforce. It's true in kind of our society. It's all changing. And so really anybody, leader or any other profession, medical, you pick it, IT, if you are not continuing to learn, you're going to be obsolete.
Right.
In a couple of years. So leadership's like anything else. We've got to keep learning and growing and evolving.
Right. And of course, one of the tricky things about being a leader is that you went from just doing your little thing, building that widget, to everything else that you have to do as a leader, and I love that you have a human resources background, because that's one of the things that gets very complicated, and obviously it depends state to state, country to country, all these various things, just some of the laws that one has to follow. Then you're probably responsible for a budget. You're clearly responsible, probably, I shouldn't, for managing people. You need somebody to lead or you're not a leader.
Right.
And so there are all of these skills that, again, you might have never even had to use that, poof, all of a sudden you do.
Yeah, you're anointed. And when you become managers at all levels, a manager, a director, a vice president, a senior vice president, a president, Those are all versions of manager. Well, so one of the things we have to learn is management and leadership are different.
Right.
And we have to learn to do both.
Mm-hmm.
When managing is managing a budget,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, it's managing processes, it's managing projects, it's managing things. Leadership is about people.
Right.
It's communicating, it's inspiring, it's motivating, it's listening, it's connecting, it's aligning. So that's one of the lessons that leaders have to learn, is that management and leadership are both important, but they're different.
Right.
They certainly are related, but they're different.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that many people don't understand is you can be good at one and not good at the other.
That's very common, Deb.
Yeah.
That it's usually not very balanced. Somebody is usually better at the management piece, or they're better at the leadership piece. And the earlier that you recognize that, the more you can create the balance in your skill set. Mm-hmm.
Well, and as many of us find, one of the important pieces is that we find a good team, and that helps us with things like that. So maybe you're not the expert in a budget. Well, you have somebody on your team who is good at that. So you lead them, and they manage the budget, maybe and all of those various things. And I think that is maybe one of the hard things for many leaders, who, especially those who were anointed and became a leader, to understand is they don't they're not in it alone. They don't have to do everything. And I think, small business owners and entrepreneurs feel that way. We've talked about that a lot on the program, where, we think, oh my gosh, we have to do everything because we're in charge. And it makes us seem less, or, not as smart, or, all these various things if we ask people for advice and support. But everybody does that. A surgeon couldn't do what a surgeon does without a whole bunch of other people around. And all these various things, we all have to build good teams.
Yeah, I'm kind of a sports nut. Played sports as a young guy, and so one of the things I say a lot is, business is a team sport. I don't care if it's a small business, a mid-sized business, a big business, and leadership is a team sport, because the point of leadership is not to be the standalone superstar. Leadership is not tennis. It's basketball, or football, or baseball. It's exactly what you said. It's surrounding yourself with a team. And I think one of the things I learned early on was with complementary skill sets.
Right.
I learned early on to really complement my team with people who were good at stuff that I wasn't good at, so that we did have strong So I was a better leader than I was a manager early on in my career. So I made sure that I had good managers that were really good at the details and managing budgets and really process oriented, so that my team really was well balanced.
Right. Well, and even in individual sports, we're never in it alone. You've got coaches, you've got, people you train with, all of these various things.
Nutritionists, strength trainers, skill coaches. Yeah, you're right. Even the individual sports have surround themselves with teams to help them perform.
Great. Well, now, Mark, one of the things that you talk about are the 6 practices that separate the best leaders from everybody else. So what are those 6 practices? And then let's really talk about them in detail.
Yeah, Deb, I worked for a company for 20 years that kind of in my previous life, that for 18 of those years, it was a great company, great leadership, and a great culture. Loved working there. We all did. We had so much pride. And then a CEO retired, a change in leadership, and just drove it into the ditch.
Oh yeah.
And I've unfortunately I've seen that movie twice. So I really became acutely aware of how important leadership is, and that there was a very clear difference between good and bad leadership. which are pretty obvious. But what I really got curious about, Deb, was what was the difference between good and great leadership?
Right.
What were those nuances? So I had an experience, about 12 years ago that was a little bit like what you're doing. So after I left corporate life, I did some consulting, and I kind of stumbled into a radio show in St. Louis, small radio station. That's my hometown, St. Louis. And so it was an interview format once a week. And the idea was, so it was not unlike what you're doing. I interviewed leaders. And it was a fun experience. I met a whole lot of great people. And all the interviews were a little different, but there was one question that I asked everybody. And so the question was this: in your experience, what have you seen in your career that really separated the very best leaders from the rest? So I asked all these folks this question. I emailed it to them a week or so ahead of time so they could really think about it. So they weren't winging it. They really came ready for a great conversation. And we had so many great conversations. So these are high-level leaders. They were presidents of hospitals and construction companies and senior VPs of retail companies and small business owners and big business kind of, C-suite folks. A lot of fun, great conversations. And, several months into those conversations, Deb, it really started to occur to me that I'm starting to hear some themes here. The same themes are bubbling up. So I decided, okay, I'm going to really start paying attention to these themes. So the show lasted for 2 years. I am telling you, at the end of 2 years, there were 6 themes that were so clear that I just heard them over and over and over again. And I thought, and I said to my wife, I've got something here. Not sure what to do with it. But there are all of these folks, there were about 80 of them over 2 years, that basically said these 6 things are what separate the best leaders from the rest. So I documented them. And then I went back into corporate life, and I thought, I'm going to practice these things myself to validate them as the head of HR. And so I did that, and then I turned it into a workshop. So let me share those with you.
Great.
So these are the themes that just kept bubbling up over and over again with these folks. So the first, Deb, was build trust. I just heard that over and over again, that unless people trust us as leaders, they simply don't follow us. It's that simple. And, it's a common sense thing, but not necessarily a common practice thing. And I guess the takeaway from what I heard from these folks is that trust is just the glue to all human relationships. In business, with our customers, in our personal relationships, in our family relationships, trust is absolutely the glue to any relationship. And leadership is a relationship.
Right.
Because we are leading people, we are leading teams, we have customers. So first and foremost, leadership is a relationship, and trust is just so critical to that. It's kind of a fun anecdote here. So when I did develop that workshop, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that, we always talk about build trust as first because I believe it's first. So I'll always ask my participants in the workshop, so is it an overstatement to say that trust is everything in life, in business, in leadership? So I always ask my workshop participants that question. Here's the resounding answer in every class: no. It is not an overstatement to say that trust is everything in life, leadership. So that's really the first thing that I heard. And build trust, it just starts with that. Without it, the skills mean nothing, Deb, if we don't have trust. We're leading a parade and there ain't nobody following.
Right. Yeah.
So build trust. And as I got back into my corporate life, I really kind of realized that trust is not only kind of the foundation for leadership, but it's the foundation for a healthy culture too. And what I learned, that the impact of trust goes beyond that kind of individual relationship. It's really about healthy cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole bunch of research. Stephen M.R. Covey wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. And he said, trust impacts two very real things in business, speed and cost.
Right.
And high trust cultures get things done faster at a lower cost.
Mm-hmm.
And low trust cultures, it takes longer to get stuff done. And because of that, it costs more.
Right.
So trust has some, so we get it at a human level, but there are very tangible business outcomes that come with high trust cultures. And very tangible business outcomes that come with low trust cultures. And I don't know about you, but I've lived in both of them. And it's real. Yeah. So build trust is absolutely number one. The second one that I heard over and over again, Deb, was serve others. It's kind of that age-old
servant mentality.
Yeah, servant leadership. And kind of what you're going to kind of discover with these 6 practices is they are common sense, but not necessarily common practice.
Right.
So servant leadership, it's an age-old concept that says my job as a leader is to really help other people succeed. I use a quote from Jack Welch, who was kind of a legendary CEO of General Electric in their heyday. And here's kind of what he says. If there's anything I'd like to be remembered for, is that I help people understand that leadership is helping other people grow and succeed. To repeat myself, says Mr. Welch, leadership is not just about you. But here's the reality that I experienced in business, Deb, is there are 2 kinds of leaders, those that get it and those that don't.
Right.
The ones that get the idea of servant leadership, and it's really a mindset. Once they get it that it ain't about me. It's about me helping people succeed, helping my teams succeed, helping my customers win and get what they need. It's a mentality. And when people have that mentality, kind of the irony is they succeed. Right. But you've seen it, Deb, and so have I, leaders that may be very bright and very talented who don't get it.
Right.
It's
all about me.
It's that me kind of a thing. And I'll tell you, I've worked with leaders who are very intellectually talented and very bright, but there is such a blind spot. That they just don't get it, and unfortunately, it takes too long for them to get found out. Right. But eventually they do. Think about today's workforce, Deb. They don't have much stomach for kind of that narcissistic, me-oriented leader. They're not going to follow them, and they're not going to stay working for them.
Right. And it gets found out and disseminated quickly. Hello, Facebook. Well, social media, absolutely. Facebook, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, you're exactly right. So they do get found out. Who's the last to find out these narcissists? It's the CEO. Right. Oh, yeah. Because they have that blind spot. Because it's all about me. Yeah. I don't want to hear anything that's not about me, and not about me in a good way.
Yeah. And CEOs tolerate that narcissist leader a lot of times because they deliver financial results.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But in their wake is turnover and lack of engagement. So serve others is really a mindset that the very best leaders understand. Jack Welch said it really well. And then if we practice those things, the benefits are loyalty, engagement, pride and respect and performance. But it really starts with a mindset that my job as a leader is about helping my teams and my individuals succeed and grow and prosper.
Right.
And people figure that out, and they gravitate to bosses that get it. And they run like crazy from leaders that don't.
Right.
Even more true in today's workforce.
Right. Yeah, because we can easily, or I shouldn't say easily, we can go elsewhere. Whether it's that we ask for a transfer in a company, or we leave the company, we start our own business, if it's a volunteer group, you just stop volunteering, all these various things. Long gone are the days where the company had the loyalty. It's like, man, I'm just going to go somewhere else.
People vote with their feet.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And talented people understand even more that they have options.
Mm-hmm.
The more talent that somebody has,
Mm-hmm.
the more options that they have.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So the best leaders build trust and they serve others, and they're talent magnets because of that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then the leaders who don't get it lose talent.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's number 2, serve others. Number 3 is create clarity.
Oh.
People said that in different ways on my radio show. It was communicate. It was create clarity. It was vision. And so I kind of chose the terminology create clarity. And here's what that means to me based on kind of what folks kept saying to me. Creating clarity is the art and science of keeping people on the same page and pulling in the same direction.
Okay.
And that's hard to do for a couple of reasons. One is because, our business lives, our work lives in all kinds of companies, small, medium, and large, we're busy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're busy. And so busyness is sometimes the enemy of communicating well.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, we're too busy to read those memos, and
that's exactly right. I'm too busy to have one-on-one time to communicate with my people. I'm too busy to have kind of team meetings. I'm too busy to send emails. I'm too busy to read emails. But the other thing that's kind of the enemy of clarity is change. I may have done a great job of creating clarity and communicating to my team last week about what's happening, what's coming down the pipeline, what are the key priorities, what are, kind of my expectations, and then it changed.
Right.
And it just changed.
For whatever reason.
For a million reasons. Because the customer wanted something different, or because somebody above me said, yeah, that was a good idea last week. But we got a shiny new penny that we're going to focus
Squirrel.
and sometimes it's very well planned, intentional change, by the way, too.
Right.
So creating clarity, to me, is maybe the hardest thing that we do in leadership because it is hard to do and because it's so dang important to do. And the other thing is, Deb, is we have people working in different locations more than we used to. We have remote colleagues. So when people aren't sitting in front of us, we have to kind of work at communicating. And tools like this, like Zoom, certainly help. But creating clarity is really, the punchline is keeping everybody on the same page, pulling in the same direction. And that is hard to do, but companies that do it well, I believe, have a real competitive advantage, because think about it. It's the rowing team. There's 5 of us in this rowing boat, I guess that's what they're called, that really are rowing in unison and in the same direction, and everybody's kind of pulling their weight. But you know what? That's not really the norm. Right. In businesses. It's just not.
Yeah, those boats go in circles.
They go in circles. They collide with each other. And
somebody falls overboard.
Yeah, all of those. Better metaphor than I realized. So the norm is chaos, frankly. And so leaders that work hard every day at getting people on the same page, at creating clarity, and have people pulling in the same direction, have a huge advantage in their departments, in their teams, in their small businesses, and in their big businesses. Teams that are pulling in the same direction are just going to outperform teams that are rowing in circles and people falling overboard. It's a big deal. One of the authors that I follow and that I've met, Donald Miller, is the author of Creating a Story Brand. And he has a company called Story Brand. And here's a quote from Don. He says, "If you confuse, you lose. And it's true if we confuse our customers, we lose, but if it's also true internally. If we confuse our teams that we're leading, we lose. So that clarity is such a big deal, and hard to do. So great clarity. It's number 3. Hard to do, but really a big deal when we do it well. You know, and it's true in, I don't care what kind of organization, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a volunteer organization, or whether it's a small, any kind of business, any kind of organization, you know, clarity, everybody on the same page, big deal. Families, same thing.
Right. Oh,
Are we on this? That's really the test. Are we on the same page?
Right.
So that was number 3. Number 4 is work with purpose and passion. You know, I certainly heard that from my guests that I was interviewing, but I've seen it in my own career too. You know, the best leaders just got some fire in their belly. You know, they believe in what they're doing,
Right.
enjoy what they're doing. I see it with you on your podcast. There's clearly purpose and passion, and it shows just in your demeanor, and it certainly shows with leaders. You know, leaders that just have purpose, that flows into passion. Purpose, a sense of purpose turns into passion.
Right.
And I just heard it over and over again. One of the ladies I interviewed on the radio show, Robin Sheldon is her name. She's the founder of a specialty retail company called Soft Surroundings, and she started the business probably 20 years ago, and as a catalog business for women. And then kind of 5 years into it, she's got $100 million business that's thriving, and had just opened her first retail location. And I said, that's pretty impressive. Or Robin, that's pretty impressive. How did you do that? And she said, I don't know if we had a secret sauce, other than I just really had a passion for the business. And then I hired people with a passion for the business, and we just had this kind of unified purpose for what we were trying to achieve, and the business really grew. So she said she didn't have a secret sauce, but I think she did. I think it was purpose and passion.
Right.
And her business grew. You know, probably a couple of decades ago, I read a story that has still stuck with me. So I live in the Houston area where NASA is. And so the story goes something like this, that, you know, in the early 60s, President Kennedy took a tour of NASA. President Kennedy is the one that said, by the end of the decade, we're going to put a man on the moon. And we did. So his first tour of NASA, he's shaking hands and greeting people and meeting people. And you know, he'd ask folks, you know, Deb, nice to meet you. What do you do here? And he asked, apparently a custodian, sir, what do you do here? He said, Mr. President, my job here is to help put a man on the moon.
Right.
So this custodian was all in. While he had kind of an everyday job, his purpose was to help be part of the team that put a man on the moon. And so leadership has a lot to do with, you know, a sense of purpose, that what we're doing is important, and passion that flows from that, because passion is really energy, isn't it?
Right.
You know, and here's a reality of life and business. We have good days and tough days, and we have good weeks and tough weeks. You know, we have health challenges. I read your story, and we have good years and tough years. And what I've seen is passion is the fuel that energizes us through that tough week.
Right.
So work with passion.
Well, and when that deviates more than, you know, just temporarily, things really go off the rails. You know, I just made a note here to myself about Tesla. I mean, you know, Elon Musk has this great passion for this company, but now he's kind of over here, and now he's kind of over here. And, you know, it has definitely affected the company.
I'll tell you a quick story kind of related to that. So I met a guy that worked there, and for about 6 years, and he said it was utter chaos. People coming, people going. He said, but my team stayed for 6 years and performed at a high level in the midst of the chaos. And I said, how'd you do that?
Right.
He said, purpose. We had a sense of purpose that he said, and that is kind of the secret sauce for Tesla, is they do have a bunch of evangelists.
Right. They're kind of the little islands of.
Yes, who believe in kind of changing the world with, kind of electric vehicles and reducing carbon print and all that kind of stuff. So that is the thing that keeps Tesla going is a sense of purpose, even though they get distracted and he gets distracted. So that's a great story that purpose really fuels passion and keeps people going. Right. In tough times and in the midst of chaos. So the next one is just fully engaged people. I don't know if you've seen the surveys, Deb, and so have I. Every year, Gallup and these other survey companies report the same results year after year, decade after decade, that no matter what company or what profession, about 2/3 of people that work for companies are not engaged.
Right.
They are not engaged. And it just blows your mind, that every time I read one of these surveys. And so as the head of HR, we did those kind of surveys and the results weren't very different than that. Right. And that's all about leadership, Deb. It's on us to hire people that are engaged and passionate, but lead in a way that people want to be engaged. Right. So, we got to do better than that. And the best leaders do better than that. And so how do we do that? I guess what I figured out early on is, people are people. Right. And people bring 3 things to any job, heart, mind, and natural abilities. People bring a heart, which is where passion comes from. And as a leader, we have to tap into that, by treating people with respect and valuing them. People bring a mind, which is their ideas and their knowledge, and we have to tap into that. And people bring natural abilities. I have a younger brother that the reason he got out of high school is because they didn't want him to come back.
Go away.
But I will tell you this, he is, I'm not exaggerating, he's a world-class mechanic, even as a young 18-year-old.
Right. Yeah, and so the skill set just didn't match.
Yeah. So we all have skill sets. Right. And our jobs as leaders is to recognize people's natural skill sets and put them in a position to succeed. Right. Right. So, these low engagement scores year after year, that's on us as leaders. We've got to do better. And the best leaders, kind of back to, what do the best leaders do? They connect with people. They reach out. They treat them with respect. Right. They ask for their ideas and their opinions. And they just treat them as equal partners. So that's just a symptom of poor leadership. But there are, pockets of high engagement, and that's about leadership. It's about creating teams that people are proud to be part of and want to be part of.
Right. I think especially early on, Apple would be, a fantastic example of that. It's been many, many years since I read the book by Guy Kawasaki about Apple. But he talked about the fact that everybody lived and breathed what they were doing. They loved working there. And there were so many things that went into it. They created that culture. He talked about, the grand piano where, they made people want to be at work. But they really did. They hired the right people. And, if you weren't a good fit, well, it didn't mean anything bad. It just meant you weren't a good fit.
That's exactly right. And you just said something that it has everything to do with fully engaging people. And that's the environment that we create. That we create an environment that's collaborative, that people are treated with respect, that we expect to perform, and that we expect everybody to pull their weight, and that we expect to tell each other the truth, and that we have and that we hold ourselves accountable. So you're exactly right. There is a lot that goes into that. And so we have to be pretty intentional about the culture that we want to create.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just happenstance. Those cultures you're talking about, that wasn't just random stuff.
No.
Somebody thought a lot about that in terms of what they wanted to create. There may have been a little trial and error there. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, fully engaging people is very intentional.
Right. And of course, one of the things that I've heard, and I want to make sure that we get through all 6, so I don't want to deviate here too much, but, when that culture changes, it can have so much effect. Back to Apple, when it became more corporate, people said, we shouldn't provide fresh orange juice, and we shouldn't have the grand piano and all of those things. And you just go back to being, your little worker bees. Productivity suffered. Employees left, all of those various things.
I've seen this twice, Deb. I've seen a good culture, actually a great culture, which was a lot of what you described, a change in leadership and become more corporate, and literally destroy it. And then I saw it again where a great company with a healthy culture, growing business, a lot of pride and respect, change in leadership, and again, try to make it more corporate and just suck the life out of it.
Right.
So, in the company that I worked for more recently in the Houston area, we had a great CEO. Phil Hawk is his name, and Phil retired. But one of the things he used to say, I had so much respect for him. He always would say, it's fragile.
Right.
We are growing, we are prospering, we are doing well, but it's fragile. We have to keep earning it, and we have to keep creating it. Right. And I remember saying to myself a couple of times, "Come on, Phil, you're overplaying that card." He was exactly right.
Right.
It is fragile. Culture, it's like the human body. It can be incredibly strong and resilient, and at the same time, kind of fragile.
Right. Oh, yeah. One tiny little misstep.
Yeah.
Even if, your body, you eat something wrong.
Yeah.
And, it can have devastating effects, whether it's for an hour or, long term. Yeah. Something tiny like that.
Yeah. And something tiny, whether it's a virus or something, in the corporate body, can grow and become a big problem. So, fully engaging people, we're never done. Right. Creating a healthy environment, we're never done. It's like creating clarity. It's an everyday job. We have to stay vigilant about creating a healthy culture.
Right. Okay, so what's number 4?
So I think we're on to number 6.
No. I don't think. Are we on to 6?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I am so smooth, Deb. It just goes that fast.
It just goes.
So the first was build trust, serve others, create clarity, work with passion, fully engage people. And then the last that I learned both in my radio show and in my leadership career is act with courage. Act with courage. I interviewed a gentleman named Gus Lee. I read his book and I called him and said, "Man, I want to interview you for my radio show." His book was called Courage, the Backbone of Leadership. So I interviewed Gus, and basically what he said is, leadership takes a backbone. Right. We have to make hard decisions. We have to have tough conversations with people. We have to tell the truth. We have to speak truth to power. Right? We have to speak up when nobody else is willing to. And he was so right about that. We have to act with courage in leadership. That's the tough part of the job. So one of the questions I asked Gus, I said, "Okay, I hear you. I got you. But let me ask you this, Gus, is courage hardwired, or can we build courage muscles?" And his answer was, courage is 100% developed.
Interesting.
And I had kind of a moment, but after a couple of seconds of pondering, and I thought, he's exactly right. It made me relate to early in my career as a manager that I was learning to be, right, is I didn't like giving the tough feedback.
Right.
I just didn't
Right.
like.
Oh yeah, we don't want to hurt people's feelings. Is
Yeah.
basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I wanted everybody to like me.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that is the bugaboo of every manager, every leader. But I want you to like me.
Yeah, but so here was the hard lesson learned, which is how we learn leadership. Is
Mhm.
had one of my managers come to me and close the door and said, "Are you open to some feedback?" I said,
And you're thinking, uh-oh.
and I said in a very open-minded way, "What?" Yes, I'm open to feedback. What is it? And so this manager said, "Look, there's this other manager in our department that just that's a problem. They take credit for their people's work. The morale in that department is not very good, and it bleeds over to the other departments. And I know you know it. And
Right.
when are you going to do something about it?"
Why have you allowed this to happen?
That's exactly right. So I really felt the sting of that. So I said, after getting a little defensive, I said, "You know what? Thanks for coming in.
Mhm.
I really appreciate you telling me the truth. I
Right.
really thank you for that."
Mhm.
So, I slept on it, and then I had that conversation with that manager the next day, and that manager got mad at me that
Of course. Yeah.
that actually for a different reason.
Mm.
The manager got mad because I had withheld that feedback.
Ah. So why, why hadn't you told me this sooner? Mhm.
That's exactly right. And that manager kind of pointed a finger at me, Deb, and said, "You owed me that feedback."
Right. And
And
you know what? That's 100% correct.
And it was. And I had to kind of be humble and apologize and said, "I did owe you that feedback."
Mhm.
And so that was one of those lessons learned that really stung, Deb, that absolutely matched up with what Gus Lee was telling me kind of in that interview, that, if we're going to really be the best leaders, we have to have the backbone to tell the truth,
Right.
to own up to our mistakes, to keep our commitments, and to make the tough decisions. That just goes with leadership. So that's really the sixth practice that I learned, both from kind of interviewing people and then in my own experience, that act with courage is really one of the things that separates the best leaders from the rest. And it doesn't come easily. We have to build those courage muscles.
Right. Right. And it's interesting because we see people who are great leaders, and when you think about it, they do all of those things. They and a big part of it is that courage thing. It's making those hard decisions, whether it's to say, you know what, your skill set isn't the best fit, or even just things like your background in HR. I'm sure things like this happen all the time, where you're having to tell people, and now they're one of the things is there are definitely tactful ways to say these things, and and legal ways to say things also, but again, when you're telling them you want the best for them, back to point number 2, I believe it was, that you really are wanting the best for them. That's where you need to kind of take this from.
You're exactly right. I'll tell you, Deb, that again, I kind of learned this a little bit later on after I learned the 6 practices and started integrating them into my own leadership. And it really did help me, even though I was kind of at a high level, become better. But here's the other thing I learned is, and you just hinted at it, that they connect. They do not stand alone. So what I learned was when I gave people kind of that tough feedback, and I did it respectfully, and they trusted me, and they knew that I had their best interest, the first 2, build trust and serve others.
Right.
When they knew that, that gave me a license to give that feedback.
Yeah. As opposed to, well, the rule is.
Yeah. So they really do kind of work in harmony with one another. When you do give the tough feedback, if you've built trust and they know that you want them to succeed, that sure goes a lot better.
Right. Right.
Those tough decisions when they trust and respect me, even if they don't agree with all my decisions, and they don't.
Right.
They still
you don't want a bunch of yes men, yes people.
No, that's right. That's exactly right. If they trust me and respect me, we can disagree respectfully. It'll be okay.
Right. And it's funny, the other thing I wrote down as you were talking about all of this is, as a leader, I think one of the most important things is that you have to be human also. And all of that kind of flowed through there. We have to say, oh my gosh, this was my fault. I own up to this. And and not taking credit where credit isn't due. But I think probably one of the big things that a lot of people that I've seen who are struggling with leadership is they don't want to appear human, and especially women. When women are leaders, I had a guest on several weeks ago where we were talking about the fact that in many cases, you get into a difficult situation as a woman, and sometimes those tears start. For whatever reason, that's just sometimes our makeup. And, and I've actually worked for men who have cried also, but we see that as a negative. And, to me, if it's an appropriate reaction, that's probably one of that ties in. That's building trust, that's empathy, that's all of those things. When I've had to fire employees and it was hard and they knew it was hard on me too, and now granted, there were times where you fired employees where, it's like your brother was school, you were glad they were gone, but yeah, when we show that we're human and that we make mistakes and that we have that passion, I think that's the other thing too, is sometimes we think we need to put ourselves in the box of not feeling, it's so important that we show that.
You are so right. Here's what people respect. I respect it, and you respect it, and so do the folks that we've ever worked with or will work with, is we respect authentic.
Right. We
respect real. The best leaders that I have seen and that I've worked with, they were real. The CEO that I was telling you about that I respected so much, he loved Duke basketball, and he would brag about
Coach K, you can get him.
Yeah. And so we'd talk smack about basketball. He was real. He was a father and a grandfather, and he loved showing pictures of his grandkids, just like all the rank and file folks. So authenticity means that we can show emotion, that we can admit mistakes, and that we just don't have to pretend to be something that we're not.
Right.
And I find that people really respect that. And what I find that people don't respect, is phonies, that have this mask on and that have this coat of armor on. How long does it take you and I to figure out that somebody's a phony?
Not too long.
Pretty quick.
Yeah, we've been around the block a couple times.
Brene Brown is an author and a researcher, and she's here in the Houston market where I'm at. She talks a lot about vulnerability is a strength for leaders. And my takeaway about what she's really talking about is just being real.
Right.
And being open and being human. That kind of puts us on the same side of the fence.
Right.
Is when we're human, rather than on different sides of a fence.
Right.
When my folks are human and I'm superhuman. Well, I'm not.
Right. And it was interesting though, as you were talking about this, I was thinking, but there still is kind of that little dividing line. And many cases, because, ultimately, it's the buck stops here type of thing. And we can't always be one of the boys, which is hard when you've been promoted up. We used to go out every Friday and, and sometimes it's just not appropriate for the boss to go out anymore with everybody, because sometimes, they need a break from all of that. And I think that is one of the hard things for somebody who is a newly minted leader to understand is, when am I the boss and when am I the friend? And that is very difficult.
It is.
And that's like a whole nother program.
it is, but it comes with wisdom and experience,
Right.
I think, because I struggled with that, certainly. It's like a lot of things in life, Deb, it's just creating balance.
Right.
That as a leader, I absolutely want to have healthy relationships with my folks. I know their spouse's name. I know that they have kids and what their kids like, soccer. I know big things that are coming up, kind of a thing. I know that. And they know that I'm married and have 3 sons and that I will show any stranger a picture of my grandson. They know that about me.
Wait a minute. I didn't see a picture.
Well, you will. So we know each other, and that's a strength.
Right.
But there are times when I have to be the boss.
Right.
Here's what I learned about that, Deb, is just kind of being upfront about that. So we're going to have a conversation, and this is a conversation where I got the boss hat on.
Right.
So the fact that I'm just kind of transparent about that helps.
Right.
Kind of just be in that role when I need to be in that role. And I found people can respect that.
Right. Right. I watched the TV show Last Man Standing, the one with Tim Allen. And I remember one of the episodes where, his daughter works for him in the store, and they were having, kind of a difficult situation because it was dad and daughter. And then all of a sudden he had to be boss and employee.
Yeah.
He didn't like that. And we, but daddy, and he said, no, in here, I am the boss.
Yeah.
And, and then she went, oh, okay. So maybe it is, your team still goes out for Friday night, beverages. You go and have one and then you leave, and then they can dish about you. But it is, we still have to remember we're not always their friend.
That's right. And so that comes with wisdom and experience, that connect with people, spend time with them, have a beer with them. Not 10. You're right about that. 10 beers is a little too much authenticity. But when it's time to be the boss, just put the boss hat on and say so.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Mark, this has been absolutely delightful. And we definitely have to have you on again, because this is a subject that I love talking about. I mean, we didn't even talk about communication, and I mean, that is definitely a topic. That's my background, corporate communications, and, and I know you work a lot in things like that, but, tell us a little bit more about what your company offers.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So I do executive coaching.
Okay.
Which is one-on-one, and that's with a CEO or somebody in a C-suite, or somebody who's kind of that next C-suite kind of person that a company wants to invest in. So that's part of my practice, kind of one-on-one coaching. Here's kind of the fun part of that is, since I've been doing that, the School of Hard Knocks has served me so well. I can't think of a time where somebody said, okay, here's a challenge I want to talk with you about that I haven't experienced 3 times.
Right.
So kind of both the academic background and kind of the real world School of Hard Knocks has really served me well in kind of that executive coaching piece. And a lot of the folks that I coach are, not all of them, but they're kind of new to that role. So they're a new CEO.
Okay.
They're a new C-suite. They're a new vice president. They're a new director. That's a steep learning curve. That first year is a steep learning curve. So that's probably where I bring the most value.
Okay.
Coaching is helping somebody navigate that first year or two, because there's a lot of landmines and that kind of thing. So that's one thing, executive coaching. And then the second thing is it's really leadership development. Okay. So that's really going to be groups that are learning how to be the next level leader. They might be in a workshop that's learning how to be a new leader, kind of a thing. They might be in a workshop that's learning how to be kind of that next level leader. So that's going to be in a group setting. And that's kind of evolving. How that's happening too, Deb, is, historically, so I've done leadership workshops literally all over the world, on 4 continents in many countries. So now my leadership workshops are a combination of live and FaceTime. And what you and I are doing now, the technology is so cool.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you work with people around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that makes it real cost effective for companies to not have to put everybody on an airplane and go to a 2-day workshop, that we can spread it out over time in smaller chunks using the existing technology. And frankly, I found that more effective than, pouring 2 days of stuff in people's head, which you don't retain a lot of, versus doing kind of what you and I are doing in hour chunks over 3-4 months is much more effective. So that's the second thing, is really leadership development in chunks that people can absorb, apply, and then come back to the workshop and kind of debrief. So that's kind of the second thing.
Great.
And then the third thing is really kind of helping people kind of look at their culture.
We didn't even talk about that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. And again, I've seen it. I think I told you this. I call it the tale of two cultures. I've seen a company have a great culture and then drive it into the ditch. I've seen that twice. So I am so clear about the value of a healthy culture on performance and growth and sustainability. So that's the third thing I'll help companies do, is really kind of evaluate their culture so that they are positioned to have a sustainable culture that people are really proud to be part of.
Great. Well, Mark, how do people find you and connect with you online?
Yeah, I appreciate that. 2 ways, Deb. I have a LinkedIn profile, so if you just look Mark Hinderliter on LinkedIn, you'll see my smiling face. It'll say
You're
Mark.
probably the only one.
Actually, believe it or not, there's a couple.
Oh, kind of like there's a couple Deb Creers. That just always surprises me.
So I connected with another Mark Hinderliter, and I just said, hey, great name. And so we connected on LinkedIn. But yeah, it's Mark Hinderliter, PhD. And you'll see kind of my tagline is executive coach, entrepreneur, and veteran. So that's me. So that's my LinkedIn. And then I have a website. It's called, it's www. Diamond Quality Leadership, all one word.
Perfect.
Which is really kind of how I've branded the 6 practices that separate the best leaders from the rest. So Diamond Quality Leadership is the website.
Perfect. Great. Well, Mark, I've been having a fascinating time talking with you. And as I said, we definitely need to have you on again. But until then, what final piece of wisdom would you like to leave everyone with?
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's 2 superpowers in any business. It's either a superpower or it's kryptonite. And I've learned this just from my own experience. A lot of data kind of supports it. But the 2 superpowers in any business, Deb, are leadership and culture. So those can be superpowers or those can be kryptonite. And it's really the company's choice about the priorities and focus that they put on leadership and culture. And the companies that do a good job of being intentional about it, it's a superpower. It's twin superpowers. And companies that take it for granted and think it's not important, it's kryptonite. So leadership and culture are the 2 superpowers that absolutely can separate any business from the pack.
Perfect. I love it. Well, I am Deb Creer, and I'm, looking forward to talking with him again. But until then, please, thank you, Mark Hinderliter, for being on our program today. And everyone have a great day.
Thank you, Deb.
Thanks for listening to the Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer. Join us next time for more real-life stories and techniques to power up your business.
You've been listening to C-Suite Radio. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.